Good morning.
Good morning.
That was terrible. Good morning.
Good morning.
There we go. How is everybody today?
Awake.
So just a reminder that next week we're going to not have our normal Bible class, but next week we're going to have that special mission festival, and it's going to be a great festival. If you look around, there's a couple posters hanging about. We're going to have Pastor David J. Weber here. He's going to be talking about our mission work in Kenya, in Africa. He's going to be here talking about all the things that our synod is doing in Kenya with our the church body there, that we're now in fellowship. We just declared fellowship with them this past synod convention. He's kind of an interesting guy, former president of the Ukrainian Lutheran Seminary. He is also one of the founders of the seminary there in Kenya, and helping start the mission talks there with the Kenyan Lutheran Church. And so he's going to come and talk to us and be our lead our Bible study, be our preacher next week, and then also after our potluck, show us kind of a glimpse on our screen about what it's like to be part of the church. And you're going to see that their worship is different than ours, but although it's different, they are very much Lutheran in their belief and their teaching. So come join us, be part of this exciting thing that's going on in Kenya. And so that's next week at 8:45. It all kicks off. And also be part of that fellowship and potluck deliciousness. All right. So we'll begin our Bible study. One quick thing, this past weekend, I got a chance to go to Toledo. Who in here has ever been to Toledo? A little bit of crime. You've experienced crime, right? Where's Mrs. Badenhoff? Is she here?
Yep.
You've been to Toledo, right?
Yep.
Did you hear what they're doing in Toledo?
Not recently.
City Council, you'll be excited, has just passed an ordinance to make the excessive use of commas a crime. It's true. And the penalty is going to make it's an excessively long sentence. But see, speaking of crime, I ordered the new catechism for our synod from Amazon, and it was stolen right here from church. Called the police, no prime suspect. Prime, Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime. All right, let's get started. Turn the speaker on. All right, here we go. Let's get started. So if you remember right, we were talking about polygamy. I showed you that nice video last time. If you remember, we're going to begin with that little box, the little pink box. It says up there, this is a good explanation. We'll review that. It says, what is polygamy? Polygamy certainly was not part of God's original design. After the fall, it was an innovation by Lamech in Genesis 4:19, a descendant of Cain. The first fratricide, Lamech, the first bigamist, bragged to his wives about his prowess at murder. Oddly enough, that was also the first bit of poetry in the Bible. The Old Testament recognized the existence of polygamy among some of God's chosen people. It could be the result of a lack of faith that God would fulfill his promise. Abraham and Hagar in Genesis 16. In the case of Jacob, it was the result of trickery and a human solution for infertility, although it caused a family conflict. God used it to multiply his people, including the family line of the promised Messiah. However, no Old Testament passage requires it or commends it as God-pleasing. Many passages advocate monogamy as the normal and ideal form of marriage. All right? So I think that's important that it's never recommended. All right. So now we'll move on, because that was just a way of reminding us of things. Let's go to the passage now at the very top of the page. It says, Jacob worked for 14 years. Jacob's family grew. Leah and Rachel had 12 children. During this time, he had 11 sons and a daughter. Yet Jacob longed for a home. This was the beginning of a great nation. God's promise realized. He yearned to see all of God's promises in his life. He pleaded for an unconditional release from Laban's control. He made a deal with his father-in-law, and by God's grace, within 6 years, he had a flock larger than could be imagined. All right, so let's take a look at the timeline. Now, I know this is hard for everyone to see from where they're at, but if you look here, we can see a little bit of what's happening here on a biblical timeline. Here we have Jacob. Here we have Jacob leaving Isaac. And here we have him marrying Leah. All right? And then we have all of the different children being born. And we see them being born. Reuben, Simon, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Dinah, Joseph, Benjamin. And then him living in Canaan for 33 years. To give us a little bit of idea of what's going on in the life of Jacob. All right. Now let's turn in our Bibles. We have Genesis chapter 30 open. Let's actually dive in and let's find out what's going on, because it references him pleading for unconditional release. Would somebody be willing to read this for us?
For before I came, you had very little, and it has been multiplied many times over. The Lord has blessed you wherever I set foot. Now it isn't time for me to provide for my own household as well. Laban asked, "What shall I give you?" Jacob said, "You do not have to give me anything, but if you will do this thing for me, I will continue to take your flock to pasture and watch over it. I will pass through all your flocks today and take all the speckled and spotted sheep, every dark brown spot among the lambs, and the spotted and speckled goats. These will be my wages. This is how I will be able to prove my honesty wherever you demand an accounting of my wages. Any goats that are not spotted or speckled, and any lambs that are not dark brown that are found with me will be treated as stolen." Laban said, "Very well, we will do what you have said." But that day Laban removed all the male goats that were streaked and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had any white on it, and all the dark brown sheep, and handed them over to his sons. Then he separated himself from Jacob by 3 days' journey, and Jacob pastured the rest of Laban's flocks. Jacob took fresh branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees. He peeled stripes on them so that the white inside the branches was visible. He put the branches that he had peeled into the gutters of the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, so the flocks would see them. they conceived when they came to drink. The flocks conceived in front of the branches, and the flocks produced streaked, speckled, and spotted animals. Jacob separated the lambs, and he made the flocks face toward the streaked animals, and the black animals in the flock of Laban, and he kept his own herd separate, and he did not put them into Laban's flock. And whenever the stronger animals in the flock were in heat, Jacob laid the branches in the gutters where the flocks could see them, so they would conceive while looking at the branches. But when the weak animals in the flock were in heat, he did not put the branches in. So the weaker animals were Laban's, and the stronger were Jacob's. The man became much wealthier and had large flocks, female servants and male servants, and camels and donkeys.
All right, so let's break this down real quick. What was the deal that Jacob just made with his father-in-law? What was the actual deal? Anybody catch it?
Any spotted or speckled animals would be his, and the rest would belong to Laban.
All right, so he's doing a bit of genetics here.
Yeah.
All right, so this is
Manipulate the gene pool.
so he's manipulating the gene pool. He's making a deal with his father-in-law. He's saying, "I'll be the shepherd of your flocks, right? And we're going to put the flocks together. And every baby that's born, I'll keep a certain amount of the flock, right? What flock will I keep? Every baby that's born that looks like what?
Quick spotted.
Spotted or speckled, I'll keep those. Which ones do you keep?
White ones.
The white one.
Okay, why does Laban think this is a good deal? Well, go ahead.
The hair which they used was more valuable.
Okay. And so what does that tell you? Likely was the more commonly born animal.
It's the white one.
The speckle.
Not the speckled.
Oh,
No,
my.
yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise Jacob would have. Laban, who is very greedy, we know that from the way he dealt with Rachel and Leah, right? He's very shrewd. He's a good businessman. He's looking at Jacob's deal and he's going, wait a second. I want to keep the most amount of sheep possible, right? So he looks at Jacob's deal and he says, I want to keep as many sheep possible. So he knows how this all works. He says, the most amount of sheep that are constantly being born are this one plain kind of sheep. So the recessive, I know I'm using kind of science words, the recessive gene that is constantly being born, the least amount of sheep being born are these speckled sheep. And so Jacob comes and says, I'll tell you what, I'll keep the least amount of sheep that are born in the flock. So out of 10 sheep that are being born, maybe 1 or 2 are speckled sheep. Maybe. You get to keep the most, I'll keep the least. That'll be my wages. Do you see the deal he's making? Why does Laban take that deal?
Because he thinks he's gonna get the better of the deal.
He's keeping the better deal. That's the deal he's making. But now that leads us to our next question. Jacob and Laban had negotiated a plan for his release, right? He says, okay, I'll keep that deal. How does Jacob try to manipulate the system, though? Jacob does something that's kind of weird here.
Yeah.
What does he do that's kind of weird?
It is kind of weird because it's like taking branches and showing them to the flocks, and suddenly the flocks are saying, okay, now everything's coming out striped and speckled.
Okay, farmers, do you guys have any weird things that, like, dads used to do? Like, did your dads ever do anything weird that you thought was kind of strange, like farmer almanac-y?
Putting apple cider in the chicken's water so they lay more eggs. Apple cider vinegar.
Okay, there you go. Anything else kind of farmer almanac-y that your dad used to do? So this is something that people in the Middle East do. You can look it up, and they still do it in certain places. what he's doing is this. Let's look at the actual verse here. Ready? Jacob took fresh branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees. This is in verse 37. He peeled the stripes on them so that the white inside of the branches were visible. And then he put the branches that he peeled into the gutters of the watering troughs. So now he sticks them in the watering troughs so that they're visible to the animals when they come over to eat and drink. So that they can see the speckles, okay? So that they would see them. They conceived when they drank. The flocks conceived in front of the branches, and the flocks produced streaked and speckled branches. So this was a common practice amongst farmers. They believed that this would help in conception. They would conceive what they saw. This was a practice that the farmers would use. It was kind of like what you said with the apple cider. This was kind of what you said with the apple cider. It's a practice that the farmers have. And some farmers in the Middle East still do things like this. Now, was this actually helping him?
No.
What does this show us from Jacob's past?
Old habits die hard.
Old habits die hard. He's still going to continue to do things. Where have we seen this in his past before?
Oh yeah, this is just his interactions with Esau.
Explain a little bit more.
So, it's where he kind of tricked Esau because Esau needed. Well, it's where he got his birthright. He sold his birthright right there. So, essentially tricked him, saying, "Okay, well, you're about to die. Give me your birthright, and I'll give you the stew."
There you go. There you go. So God said, who's going to get the birthright all the way at the beginning when they were born?
It was going to be Jacob, anyways.
The younger is going to get the birthright. But here comes Esau. I'm starving. Give me some of your red stew. Right? And so what does Jacob do?
Well, give me your birthright, and I will.
If you give me your birthright, then I'll give it to you. He was trying to help things along, right? He doesn't need to help things along. God's going to give it to him anyway. So this is another way you can do it. Look at this. This is from one of the commentators. Jacob's device then, here is described, is to lay laid peels of rods of trees that peel more readily than others, and to show a particularly white surface after peeling, white poplar, whose bark is naturally peels off in large slabs to lay those in troughs where sheep drink during breeding season. Breeding took place with these speckled or spotted objects before the eyes of the sheep or goats and lambs. Now, especially, the lamb is said to be susceptible to these things seen at the time of copulation or during the period of gestation by way of having the effects of such sight of the offspring. Surely man cannot be so definitely in control of nature. So he's still thinking, well, maybe I can help things along, God, right? Maybe I can do it.
Some people think that that's also an act of divination.
Yeah. So maybe he's trying to push things. Right? Maybe he's trying to work it along a little bit. Not so though. He still hasn't learned his lesson. So how did God answer his fault when he helped it along with Esau?
He eventually allowed enmity to build with Esau, and it drove him away from his family.
And he had to
Basically, had
learn
to flee. Yeah.
for a lot of years, right? So the same thing's going to happen here. It ends up taking him 6 more years for God's plan to come true. So what does it say about the 6 years? What does that say that God meant it took him 6 more years?
It was just God's timing.
It was God's timing, not Jacob's timing. Under Laban's persistent provocation, Jacob's old tendency to practiced deception showed itself here. He yielded to the temptation to take matters into his own hands. Jacob was not yet ready to graduate from God's school. So if you remember right, we talked about how God was taking the kind of school. God was saying, I'm not done yet. You got to continue to go to school here. You have to continue to do the schooling. All right, in question number 7. Laban also had a little bit of deception. Did you catch it?
Yeah, it gave all the spotted streaks, all the ones that would be Jacob's wages from the start. He gave them to his sons.
There you go. So here is the problem. Ready? Laban and Jacob made this deal, right? You get to keep all the spotted ones. I get to keep all the plain ones. But the first thing he does is look here. Look at the green. But that very day, this is the day of their conversation, Laban removed all the male goats that were speckled or streaked or spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had any white on it, and all the dark brown sheep, and handed them over to his sons. So he left Jacob with only plain colored sheep. Why is that going to cause a problem? Genetics. There's no possibility that any spotted sheep could be there. So how can there be any spotted sheep show up?
Or it's also the genetics, because now it's like, well, you'll probably get some spotted and streaked ones out of the plain white ones, because we know we get them, because I just took them out of the flock. But it's going to take you a lot longer now to get the size that you want.
There you go. So the ones that you do get, you're starting from a much smaller flock, yeah? So you see what happens is he's also building this problem, isn't he? So he's trying to manipulate a little bit. So now let's go to Genesis chapter 31. Let's find out how God is going to deal with this situation. Because God's going to come in. We have 6 years are going to pass between our deal and Genesis 31. Anybody want to read Genesis 31?
Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything from our father. He has acquired all his wealth from things that belonged to our father. From the look on Laban's face, Jacob realized that his attitude toward him was not what it had been before. The Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. Jacob sent for Rachel and Leah and told them to come to the field where his flock was.
All right, we're going to stop there for a second. So something to help you understand what's happened in these 6 years. In these 6 years, God has blessed Jacob. No matter how many times the deception has happened, God has propagated the amount of speckled sheep. Every day, more and more spotted sheep have continued to be born. Each day, more and more goats are born. And no matter how much deception has come in, Laban goes out and looks in his field, and guess what? Plain sheep aren't being born. Guess what's being born? The spotted and speckled. His sheep are getting fewer and fewer, and now we have these massive flocks that are all speckled and spotted. And he's going, what in the world is going on? And now his own children are getting upset because their inheritance is nothing. And now all of a sudden, Jacob is just having these massive flocks. Look at what they say. They even say, what about our inheritance? And finally, Laban goes to Jacob, and look what he says. He says, return to the land of your father.
No, that's God saying.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. God says that. Return to the land of your brothers, because he says, you're going to say this to Jacob. Now look what Laban says to him in a few minutes. He calls Rachel and Leah, and watch for Rachel and Leah's reaction. Because remember that they are Laban's own children, right? So watch for their reaction. Go ahead.
He said to them, I see the look on your father's face, and it is not favorable towards me as it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all of my strength. Your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times, but God did not allow him to hurt me. If he said, the speckled animals will be your wages, then all the flock gave birth to speckled young. If he said, the streaked animals will be your wages, then all the flock gave birth to streaked young. In this way, God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. Once during mating season, in a dream, I watched and saw male goats that were streaked, speckled, and spotted mating with the flock. The angel of God called out to me in the dream, Jacob, and I answered, I am here. He said, look, all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, and spotted, because I have seen everything that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you are anointed a memorial stone, and where you made a vow to me. Now get going, get out of this land, and return to the land where you were born. Rachel and Leah answered him, do we still have any share of the inheritance in our father's house? Isn't he treating us like foreigners? First he sold us. Now he has used up almost all the money he received for us. All the riches that God has taken away from our father belong to us and our children. Now do whatever God has told you to do.
We'll come back to that in a second. All right, let's go to question number 8. It says, Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying. So Jacob hears that the sons of Laban were saying something to him. Explain why this could have been a final catalyst in Laban's interaction with Jacob. Why might this have finally made Jacob say, all right, now it's time to go home?
It's almost like deja vu to him, because he fled when Esau was getting murderous.
All right. So finally, it's kind of he remembers when Esau finally made him flee his homeland. Now it's time, he's reliving this. Anything else?
Well, it's hard to stay someplace where you're not really welcome.
Yeah, you're not really welcome, right? He sees it.
It's like you can deal with the father, but when the sons are getting mad.
Yeah, there's trouble on the horizon.
Yeah. And what's worse than messing with somebody's money?
Messing with their family.
Messing with their family. Now he's doing both, isn't he? All right, look at this. This is from a commentary. It says, by causing Jacob to notice that his in-laws were jealous of him, God began pricking at Jacob's heart. Although circumstances by themselves weren't always accurate indicators of God's will, the Lord often uses difficult circumstances to make his children uncomfortable so that they'll follow him. God reminded Jacob of his previous promise. Although Jacob had wanted to return home earlier, after working 14 years for Rachel's hand in marriage, the timing wasn't right. 6 years later, with Jacob's family and wealth firmly established, God would finally fulfill his promise. And so, he's finally getting to that now is the time to go. Remember, he came to this land, he had nothing. He was sent there to look for a wife, but he was sent there with no money, nothing. Now he's leaving, and what's he leaving with? Family and wealth, right? Now, here we go. And children. All the children of Israel. Laban had never been particularly warm towards Jacob. Yet there is a noticeable attitude shift in this treatment of Jacob in his lives. Why? Now, look at these two shifts. Are you ready? Here's from verse 2. From the look on Laban's face, Jacob realized his attitude toward him was not what it had been before. That was from verse 2. Right? And we always love when our father-in-laws look at us that way, right? I'll never forget when my father-in-law, his first words to me. When you hear his first words towards me?
Oh boy.
This is true. I have a gun.
Pastor,
True story.
I have better.
Yeah?
First time that my dad met Eric, he picked him up, spun him around in a circle, set him down. Mind you, he's about 2 inches shorter than Eric, and said, now, that's me being friendly. You don't want to see me being not friendly.
All right, Rachel. This is verse 14. Rachel and Leah answered him, do we still have any share of his inheritance in our father's house? Isn't he treating us like foreigners? Now, this is important. Do we know how Jewish folks treat foreigners?
In a way, yes. From kind of from Leviticus and Deuteronomy later in the Pentateuch, where they're supposed to kind of treat them the same as their countrymen, but foreigners and those are not allowed in the inner courts of the temple.
They're not allowed in the inner courts of the temple. And if they're, do they treat them like family?
Not really.
And they're-
Kind of supposed to, but not really.
Yeah, all right. So there's not that warmth, right?
There's not big warmth.
Yeah, all right. So they're treating them very different.
You
So
always feel like you're the other.
the other, there you go, sojourners. You're treated as the outsiders. So from these two verses, the question then is, Laban never been. Why? What caused the shift there?
It was because he was seeing Jacob's wealth increase, and essentially Laban's wealth was just decreasing.
Yep. And what was the purpose prior to this? What was the real thing that Laban had always wanted from Jacob before?
I mean, it was free labor and God's blessing.
That was it, right? So if you think about it in that way, before this, we're going to just go here. The relationship that Jacob had always had with Laban before, Laban had always seen the relationship with Jacob as transactional. I get something from you, and you give something back to me. That's all he ever wanted from Jacob, right? When he saw Jacob at the well, or when he first got Jacob after the well, right after he first met Jacob, how did he see Jacob? I'm going to get something from you. And he used Jacob's love for Rachel in that way, didn't he? I'll use you for 14 years. Name your wages, but don't name them too low. Right? And then I'm going to trick you. I'm going to give you my other daughter because I want to use you because you're a good shepherd. Right? And then, over the sheep thing, I'm going to take all the spotted sheep out and make sure that I get the better deal. And when it no longer becomes advantageous, get out of my land.
I wonder too if part of it is both of them were not exactly honest men. They were both kind of tricksters. They were kind of like sleazy car salesmen. But Jacob wound up besting him, and people like that don't really like being bested.
Yeah. Absolutely. We're going to finish up with this next paragraph. It says, Jacob confidently shared his plans with Rachel and Leah. He pointed out that the father of his wives, had rejected him, while God had accepted him. Laban had made the mistake of basing his relationship with God on opportunism and performance. God, the wise father, unconditionally loves and cares for his own, in spite of Laban's underhanded dealings. God turned the tables on him, preventing Jacob from being defrauded. Notice the change in Jacob's response to unfavorable circumstances. Earlier in his life, he took matters into his own hands, but now he honestly evaluated the situation and made his family aware of the situation, showing tremendous spiritual growth. Do you find Rachel and Leah's reaction surprising? What do you guys think? Do you find it surprising, their reaction, that they immediately say, nah, I'm going to leave. Let's get out of here, Dad, or husband?
Oh, they just said, we're being treated like foreigners, and Laban had essentially sold them to Jacob as well. So it's like, this is a bad situation for us too, so we're out. And besides, all his inheritance is now with, all of what their inheritance would have been when Laban is now with Jacob, so, I guess we'll be going with you.
And that's the real key right there. Look at that. Jacob may have been surprised at his wife's immediate willingness to leave their childhood home. They too had been aware of the change in their father's attitude, not only towards Jacob, but towards them. He no longer looks upon them as daughters, as they said, but as foreigners, as slaves, whom one uses only towards their own advantage. Yeah, he basically sells them. That's what we see in Micah, look at this. Together, the sisters determined that in his marital negotiations, their father had sold them like any other commodity, right? And so they look towards God, who is going to be there for them always, as opposed to selling them like a negotiation.
When you say they look towards God, but in a few verses we're going to find out something about one of them.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's close with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you and we give thanks that although we are not always trusting and worthy, you sent your Son, Jesus, who always walked the perfect life and did it for us. Help us always look to him, the author and perfecter of our faith. Amen. All right. Well, thank you, and we'll see you upstairs. And God's blessings on your Sunday.
Well, good morning, Ken.
You're okay. Yeah. Just cruising around.
I got fruit snacks.
Yeah.
I thought I was gonna wear a dress and I'm like, nope.
That's good. I'm glad you like it.
She makes my Rachel behave really
Good, how
well.
are you?
So.
Yeah, and the baby? Yeah, I heard him making squeaking sounds. The Bible Yeah, yeah. No.
Well, he gave me one business card, but he gave me a book, so I got.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Hey, Casey.
Good, thank you. I'll tell Judy.
Water. Drink it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Last year, I did. Yeah, yeah. I was he said yes. Hey, Heidi said today I got a bad advice to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,